Hi friends, I'm excited to join you today here on the Fletch Forum talking about how to help your seniors and even kids who are younger and young adults. So all of us are sheltered in place during this COVID-19 crisis, and I've heard from many of you about the loss and the disappointments of your seniors in particular. And so we're going to be talking a lot about what is normal for kids, for teens, and for seniors, for young adults during this typical time period of their life, which is spring at the end of a school year, especially at the end of a senior school year. We're going to be talking about what is normal for kids in crisis, and then how to help your kids. Once you can kind of filter through what is normal, what's typical, what is typical for crisis, and then what is typical related to this COVID-19 sheltering in place and a lot of the losses, and then how to practically help your teen, your senior, or young adult. So first off, I'm going to pray, and then we'll get started. Father, I thank you so much for the ability to be at home and to be able to be with our families during this time. While it brings a lot of anxiety and a lot of uncertainty and a lot of irritation, a lot of disappointments, grief, loss of different kinds. Lord, we ask that you would use this time together to be able to equip families for helping our kids, helping our teens, helping our seniors especially. Lord, you knew before the foundation of the earth, especially for these seniors, that they would be walking through this circumstance right now. And so while there is assurance in your sovereignty and in the purpose that you have for our kids, there are also a lot of questions. There might be anger and there might be frustration. But Lord, I ask that you would help us to be able to see each of our situations in a way that is very personal and personal with you, knowing that you are personal to us, you are personal to our families, you're personal to our children. And so while we see and hear a lot of things outside of our home and through the media, through social media that is about others or about things that are larger than ourselves, we ask, Lord, that you help us to use this time as a good reminder for what we do have control of, and that you are so intimately integrated and interested and involved in each of our lives and the lives of our children. So we commit this time to you, Lord Jesus. We ask that you would use it for your honor and for your glory and for the furthering of your kingdom. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, oh great, watching from Dallas with a disappointed young adult in the other room. Okay, good. And I know, Mandy, you've got a senior. So I'm going to start in because I have 2 pages of notes that I took because there's a lot going on. Oh, you're frozen at the moment. Hopefully, can you see me? Again, Deborah, hopefully I won't be frozen. It shows that I'm live here. So hopefully you'll be able to see me and hear me. Let me just refresh my computer. I've got my computer beside me here. So hopefully everything will be going good. I'm going to wait just a minute here. Let's see. Oh, there I am. Okay. I'm going to keep on going. So I'm not sure if that's on my end or in your end, Deborah. So how to help your seniors and kids who are experiencing a lot of loss. So normally, what I'm going to talk about are 3 things. I'm going to talk about what's normal for seniors this time of year, what's normal for kids who are normally in school this time of year, for young adults, because what's incredibly important, I can see me. Okay, good. What's incredibly important is identifying for any spectrum what is typical. I know normal is an overused word, but it's important for us to know with our children, with our own circumstances, what would be happening outside of the circumstances we're currently living in. What would be happening outside of crisis? So I'm going to jump in and I'm going to talk specifically about seniors, whether they're mainly seniors in high school, but you can expand this to include other teens, young adults. I have a college senior who is in the other room next door, who's also experiencing loss during this time too. So let me just jump in. What is typical for teens and young adults? Autonomy and independence. The thrust of Fledge is all about autonomy and independence. So a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is understanding that our teens and our young adults are at the stage of life where they feel like they're ready just to push forward, but they're also held back in a lot of ways. So it's independence and autonomy, and yet now all of that is kind of stuck in this stay at home, everything's not normal. What is life supposed to look like? So let's look at what independence and autonomy normally looks like for teens and for seniors. So for seniors at this time of life, in April of their senior year, they are normally restless. Can I get an amen? If you have had teens before that you have raised, April and May, they are normally restless. Now, I want to also speak to this as a former teacher of seniors and a former senior class sponsor. So when I worked as a high school educator, I was the government teacher, so I always had seniors their last semester, and I was senior class sponsor. And I can tell you from April on, from spring break on, kids are restless. And so recognizing that your kids were already coming into this whole spring season for themselves with a restlessness. And it's the same way with college seniors. College seniors are also restless. But then young adults in between there, right? They're restless. They're wanting to find what their spot is in the world. They're wanting to find what's next for them. And so they're restless. So understand, being restless is normal. So now they're restless, but they're put in this stay at home. Everything's different for the normal, for the duration. That is very, very frustrating for them. Seniors normally at this stage of life are emotional, and they're filled with mixed emotions. So typically seniors in their last couple of semester, or in their last semester, their last couple of months of school, are filled with a wide variety of emotions, right? So they're excited to get going, but wait a minute, they don't want things to stop. Or they're so excited for things to stop because they haven't liked high school, but they're apprehensive about what's going on. So you've got this typical push-pull of opposite emotions and just heightened emotions in general. I don't know about you, but when I was writing Fledge, in fact, the one chapter title called Shut the Door on Your Way Out was a good reminder that typically seniors during this time of their life, they can be so lovable one moment, but they can be so in your face and so over you and over living at home and all of that. That's very typical. What else is typical? Seniors at this time of their life are ready to move on. So that's part of this angst that normally happens, is that they're in a lot of ways, they're ready to be done with high school, even if they're not, even if they're not wanting to leave high school. They're kind of done with a lot of things. They're done with high school drama. They're done with a lot of the stuff that they've been like pushing for so long. So they're ready to move on in a way that's normal. Seniors typically don't like to be told what to do. That's an amen. So remember that. Your young adults, your seniors, and even your older teens, really all teens don't like to be told what to do, but even more so, your seniors don't like to be told what to do. So remember that. Remember that as you're living together, is that they don't like to be told what to do, but there's some angst there now and they don't know what they're supposed to be doing. So there's a lot of vulnerability for your teens right now. And another thing that is typical for teens is that normally this time in their senior year, for most of them, it's all about their friends. Like, I know for all 4 of my high school seniors that during April and May, especially again from spring break on, they haven't wanted to be home a whole lot. And that's one of the jokes we make about as moms of seniors, is that, you know, their senior year kind of prepares you for them leaving because they really aren't home a whole lot. So remember that typically their social, their peers are very important to them during this time. And so that's one reason why they're experiencing a lot of loss during this time. It's that they physically can't be with their friends or with their boyfriend or their girlfriend. So what else is typical for kids? It's typical to have one foot in the now and one foot in the future. And this space for teens is real hard. And there's one thing that I have said over and over again regarding seniors, is that once graduation is over with, once kind of the open house celebrations are over with, they're done with high school. They really are. But what's hard is that some of them really are excited about moving forward, and some of them, it just petrifies them to move forward. And so that normal sense of like one foot in the now and one foot in the future, but you aren't really going anywhere, is very typical for teens too. So I'm going to get to how all of these things make it really hard for your teen right now. Normally, it's typical for teens to be very anxious. For seniors, it's very typical for them to be anxious. They have a loss of friends. They're anxious about the unknown that's ahead of them. Seniors tend to feel like they have this pressure of needing to know exactly what's up next. I've talked to a lot of teens or to a lot of seniors and a lot of parents of seniors about this pressure that kids have of needing to know what they're going to major in, if they're going to college, or to make that decision about college or post-high school plans right away. So that's a big pressure that is normally on kids. They're really anxious of making the wrong decision. For a lot of seniors at this time in their life, they become highly anxious because they feel pressure from mom and dad. They feel pressure from what their other friends are doing when they don't really know what they're supposed to be doing. And they kind of have this all or nothing type of pressure put on them, that if they don't make the right decision now, somehow it's going to be a failure for them down the road. So those are typical things. A few other things that I want to mention are typical is a feeling of recklessness. So we talked about restlessness. That was one of the first things that are normal about seniors right now. But there's also an element of recklessness of seniors, both high school and college, as they approach these last 2 months of their senior year. And so that reckless spirit might be something that you might be seeing in your teens right now. And as we talk about how to kind of sift through what's typical for them, what's typical for crisis, and what is really alarming, is to be able to understand that part of that senior brain behavior is, this is my last hurrah before I really have to adult. This is like my last thing. As a teacher of seniors and as a senior sponsor, I've seen a lot of seniors over my time span make a lot of really stupid decisions between spring break and their senior and when they walk across the stage. And so I just want to recognize that it can be a typical behavior for some kids to feel really reckless. And then feeling overwhelmed is the last thing I want to highlight. Seniors typically in this time of their life, April and May of their senior year, feel overwhelmed. Again, they feel overwhelmed with the pressure to succeed. They feel the overwhelm of not knowing what they're going to be doing. They feel overwhelmed with emotion. They feel overwhelmed for not being equipped to move forward. And so those are real feelings, no matter how confident your teen may be, when all that they have known is this, and there's a lot of insecurities about what's ahead. Those things are typically, they can feel really, really overwhelmed. So those are normal. Those things are normal. So as you think about those different qualities, and if you want to go back and listen to the replay to list them out, kind of think about some of these things are normal. And when I talk about normal and typical, it means for the typical teen going through the typical April and May, these are things they're going to experience. So then tailor that to your child. Tailor that to knowing your child. Okay, what is typical for their personality in the middle of all of that? What is typical for the struggles, whether they're mental health struggles or social struggles or academic struggles that kind of encompass all of that? Try to take as much of a broad, typical picture as you can. Now I want to share a few things that are typical for teens and young adults in crisis, because what they're experiencing is very adverse for them. And depending on where you live, depending on how it impacts your teen, depending on everything around it, that feeling of being in crisis can either be really heightened, or it can just be this low grade of, yeah, maybe they don't feel like they're in crisis, but their world has completely changed all of a sudden. For many of you, school has probably been canceled until the end of the school year. That's what has happened here. For many of you, perhaps graduation plans and all of those things are either you're waiting to find out about them or they've already been canceled. So what I'm going to talk about is how do people respond, how do teens respond in typical crisis when what they knew is no longer. And that's kind of what we can call crisis, is when something happens very suddenly, and when what you knew beforehand suddenly is no more. So one of the first things is that your teen, senior, or young adults, their feelings, their natural feelings, like we just talked about, are going to be ramped up. So you think about some of those feelings of recklessness, of already being emotional, of having mixed emotions, of not like being told what to do, of being reckless or feeling overwhelmed or feeling anxious. Many of those feelings might already be with a crisis scenario already be ramped up. They may have the feeling of being out of control, which I'm sure is probably paramount for most of your seniors. All of a sudden they feel out of control. They feel out of control of their present and their future. And that feels very vulnerable for them. Their brain is not completely developed enough to be able to handle all of that. So just understand that feeling of being out of control for any human makes us feel very vulnerable. And so what we want to focus on throughout the rest of this video is to focus on how to help your teen, your senior, your young adult recognize what they do have control over. And even that for you, mom, is helping us really realize, what do we have control over when our circumstances feel out of control? It is typical for teens and young adults in crisis to feel hopeless when what they thought they knew, when what they were predicting, when what they were anticipating, they don't have the hope of that. Then they might feel hopeless, or feel hopeless in the situation. They may not feel hopeless in general, but there is kind of this pattern. There is a real reality of a lot of kids right now, which is, what is the point? Why should I get up and finish homework for my senior year when it's probably just going to be pass fail, and I'm not even going to have graduation anyway? Like, what's the point? So we're going to get to validating your teen's emotions in a minute, but just understand that feeling of hopelessness in crisis is very typical. Again, the feeling of being overwhelmed, of not knowing what to do, not knowing what to do next. The feeling of overwhelm plus hopelessness can come crashing down on a teen. And so that's where your assistance as mom in helping them with some practical tools that we'll get to is really important. They might feel, so one thing that is typical of teens experiencing crisis is that they experience many losses. So in one fell swoop, right? Kind of was like this, like 2 or 4 weeks ago, all of a sudden all of these things started hitting them. First is school's going to be off for a couple weeks. Then all of a sudden school's canceled, spring break's canceled, prom is canceled, and graduation's canceled. Those are a lot of losses. And in the mix of all of that, what are all the specific losses? Losses of being with friends, losses of that senior trip that they were looking forward to. I know if this would have happened during two of our kids' spring breaks, it would have been huge, because we always made a big deal about their spring break trip of their senior year. The loss, again, of prom, the loss of graduation, the loss of, I've heard loss of college orientation already, of doing that in person, the loss of knowing, is your maybe the college campus that you were going to be hoping to go to, is that even going to be available? If your kids are running sports, the loss of their last sports season. So there are a lot of losses during this time. And then I want to talk about kids in crisis typically function out of their fear brain. And their fear brain responds in 3 ways: fight, flight, or freeze. And so think of it as that fear brain, that base brain that kind of responds with fight, flight, or freeze. And so it's your brain's typical way of keeping your person safe. And so understanding, as we talk a little bit down the road here, talking about chasing the why, is to understand that your teen's response may be fighting, what feels fearful to them. Fleeing means just escaping. I'm just going to escape the fear. It's too much. I don't know how this is going to come out, so I'm just going to retreat. Or freeze, of just numbing their emotions. And so helping their fear brain respond in healthy ways is important, and that's what we're going to be getting to as we really get into how to help them. And finally, the final thing that I wanted to mention that's typical for kids responding in crisis is that they lack perspective. So when we're in fear brain, when we're responding out of fight, flight, or freeze, we can't step back and look objectively as the big picture, because we're just focusing on survival. And so for a lot of your teens, even though you may not think that they're in survival mode, for a lot of them they are. But not everyone. For many teens right now, this whole stay-at-home thing might actually feel comforting to them in some ways, but maybe their fear is more about their family. Maybe they're really fearful about contracting COVID-19 or passing it on to someone else. Perhaps they're fearing the loss of what COVID-19 brings up in their past experiences. Maybe you've had a loss in your family or a death in your family that the events of the society itself is pushing on a trigger inside their fear brain that's saying, hey, wait a minute, this feels familiar. I know it's different, but I lost dad to something, and I'm afraid I'm going to lose my mom, or my mom's already got cancer, and so I'm worried about going anywhere because I don't want my mom to die. Like, those are real fears that may come up for your teens. So just understanding, again, what's normal for them as seniors, what's normal for teens and young adults in crisis. Now I'm going to shift how to respond. How do we respond how can you respond well to your teens and to your seniors, especially right now? What teens normally need. So let me go back to what's typical. What seniors and young adults and teens typically need from their parents during this time when they're pushing you away and they're trying to be independent and they're surly and they're moody and all of those things. They need understanding. They need grace. They need patience. They need boundaries. They need respect. They need perspective. And they need validation of their experience. So those are typical things that a senior, a young adult, or teens need. I'm going to repeat those again because they're incredibly important, and I'm going to build on those. They need understanding, which means that even though you don't understand really what their big drama is, they need to be understood. They need grace. You know what? I was all of these things my last semester right before I graduated from high school. They need some grace, understanding that they are almost an adult, but not quite. They need patience. They need other people to be patient with them because their brain still is developing. They still have all of these things that they're trying to process. They feel very vulnerable during this time. And guess what? We as parents, we're the adults. We have 30 plus years or 25 plus years on them. So our brain is fully developed and we have a lot more life experiences, but it's not our job to tell them that and expect them to rise up to the level where we are. We are to extend some patience with them. They need boundaries. Boundaries with empathy is the key. If you need to learn more about boundaries, refer to that chapter in Fledge. But they need boundaries with empathy and respect. So our teens need respect. And this is really important. And I think the more that I work with kids, the more I realize that all kids, all humans need respect. And what respect means is that you can disagree with them in a way that's respectful. You can set boundaries with them in a way that's respectful. You can validate and try to understand them in a way that's respectful. And then also perspective. So kids normally need perspective. They normally need to know that what they're going through is not going to last forever. They need to know that life will go on after their angst right now. I had my own senior and I had this discussion last year at this time when he was really stressing over a lot of things that were happening at school. And I just had to tell him, I know this is really important to you right now, but what I've learned with your siblings and with working with seniors is that, come July, this won't be a deal for you anymore because everything is looking forward for you. We're looking forward, school is done. So giving your teens some perspective, but perspective in the realm of COVID-19 is something that maybe all of us don't have, but we actually do more than what you think. So I want us to really think about perspective. And also kids need validation of their experience. You may not agree with how your teen feels. You may think that they need to just buck up and everyone else is suffering. And I'm going to say, I'm sorry, but your teen needs you to validate where they are. Why? Because their senior year is a big deal. And normally, all of these things that they're doing are a big deal to them. And I think sometimes moms, we can see things in the big perspective. We can see things from the perspective of, yeah, but what about all the adults around them who are losing their jobs? And what about people who can't feed their kids? You think you have it hard now, just wait 5 years when you have a family to support. Stop, that's not fair to them. They're a teenager and they've been waiting for 12 years. Maybe they have dreamed about their high school prom. Maybe they have, so these rites of passage, in the American culture, we don't do rites of passage very well. Graduation, high school graduation is one of the rites of passage that we do have in our society. And so the loss of these very big, momentous things are a real loss for them. So validate their experience, validate their feelings. And it can be as simple just as saying, I am really sorry that you aren't going to be able to walk through graduation. I am sorry that you won't be able to have your senior prom. I want you to know we're in this together and we're going to work to figure something out. Which brings me to what your kids might need for crisis and for practical tips for how to help them through this big mess. Now, just for a moment, I wanted to stop and breathe because we've been on already for half an hour. And I've got a lot of content here because it's really important. So I just want to recognize that we're looking at, so I'm going to continue going, so don't leave. But if you have to leave, come back for the replay. I want you to know, so what's normal for kids who are in crisis? Those few things that I just shared with you are things that your teens normally need this time, or your seniors normally need the last couple of months of school. This is what kids in crisis need, teens and young adults also. Again, they need acknowledgement of their feelings. They need their feelings validated, and I just talked about that. They need other people to validate their losses. So here again, part of understanding is to maybe sit down with them and make a list with them. What are some of the losses that you're experiencing? Let them list it. Don't you list it yourself. So this is another tip, moms. Be listeners of your children during this time. Don't force them to talk if they don't want to talk, but open up the door of opportunity to be able to say, hey, how are you doing? You know what? I'm sure you're experiencing a lot of loss because a lot of people are, but you're experiencing a lot of losses as a senior. So let's maybe list your losses if they want to do that, or just listen to them and then validate them. What kids in crisis need are routine, consistency, and stability. They need routine, they need consistency, and they need stability. Now, routine does not mean a schedule. Routine does not necessarily mean that you force them into something that you think that they should be doing. But what it just means is that the more consistent life can be for them in this new normal right now, the better. If that means that, you're going to let them, if they've got schoolwork to do, but you're going to let them sleep maybe till 9:30, 10 o'clock, you know what? Give them a little grace. Let them sleep till 9:30, 10 o'clock. And then just have there be a routine. Eat maybe one meal together. But stability also. And this goes back on mom and dad. What's the climate of your home? And I just want to go back to the chapters in Fledge on building your home, building family ties, and one and all. Those 2 chapters in Fledge are really important, where it talks about the family climate. So the more stable that you can be, the less reactive you can be, even in front of your seniors, the better. You may feel like you're in all this together, and you may be talking about things with your spouse or by yourself, or your own worries or anxieties in front of them all the time. I'd encourage you, this is one time where maybe some of those of your own anxieties need to be behind closed doors, because even your teens absorb all of that around them, so they need stability. What are some basic things that they also need? Your teens in crisis, your senior kids in crisis, even young adults, they need hydration. So when that one thing that calms down that fight, flight, or freeze brain, the fear brain, is hydration. So make sure they're drinking water. Make sure that they are maybe doing some exercising. So because the weather's nicer, and I'm here in northern Indiana, so it doesn't get much colder than here in northern Indiana, get them outside. So maybe just say, hey, can we go for a walk? And then just go for a walk. They might need a lot of sleep during this time. You may look at their sleep patterns and think, gosh, they're being lazy, or I'm really worried about their depressed moods. Gauge that for sure, but teens actually need a lot of sleep, and sleep might actually be something right now that is very healthy for them. But Taylor, watch that. If they're sleeping more than they're awake, or if they're sleeping really to escape because they can't handle different things, those are some of those fine lines to really watch. And give them an outlet for their feelings. Again, exercise is a good outlet. Encouraging them to do something physical. So that may be crafting stuff. So teens are on these phones all the time, right? That's not healthy for them necessarily. So get them away from their screens. Let them do something physical, whether that's working outside. If you have the ability, help them. Let them help you with some of the outdoor chores. Let them mow the grass. Let them create something with their hands. Maybe it's getting some artwork out that you have stuck in a closet. Maybe it's getting the sewing machine out and having them help you cook. So my college senior has been helping me cook in the kitchen some way because he's bored when he's not doing his schoolwork. So give them some physical things to do that are hands-on, incredibly important. When we're doing something hands-on, that physically helps us feel more in control. It helps us feel like things are a little bit more normal. And then talking with someone. One positive thing right now about the COVID crisis is that almost all counselors and therapists have had to move to teletherapy, which means that you probably have more, yes, Melissa, it is good material for you too. Oh, you may have more access to therapy or counseling for your senior, your teen, or young adult because of teletherapy. So reach out if you really feel like your teen or your senior or young adult could benefit from talking to a professional. Seek those out within your state, because most of them can now see outside of your immediate area as long as they're within your state because of licensing. But telehealth is actually opening up the door for more mental health options for you. And then do something that's normal in your life. So if you normally would be doing certain things, then try to do them. I'm just going to say every community is a little bit different, but if it is typical for you, if you can go for a drive with your kid and go for a walk around a neighborhood or something like that. Okay, I'm going to get to a question here. Let me get to the question here. Deborah, I'm going to get to that here for a minute. What about a young adult who is resisting all suggestions for healthy things and hands-on things like how about going for a walk? I notice you aren't eating much. Hey, could you help us out by mowing the yard? It needs mowing and when you get to get out of your room. Okay, let me get to that. Let me get to that for a minute. These are suggestions. So the thing with young adults is to remember what's typical is that typically they're going to push back on things that mom and dad are saying. That's typical. So if they're not responding to a lot of these suggestions, you can't force them. So like any other thing in their life, any other area of their life where you see your teen or young adult especially who is not coping with something really well or in a way that you think they should be coping well, you have to take their cues. You can't force them to do these things. And this is when it becomes kind of hard. Now, I'm going to get to some practical helps here in a minute, but one thing I want to focus on is not to project upon your kids what you think is happening to them. I want to say that again. Don't project onto your child what you think they're going through. Whether it's the COVID crisis or other things, is that your kids may cope in unhealthy ways and it happens right before your eyes. And more than likely, they will resist your help until they are ready to seek help. I know for myself, when I was a teen and had an eating disorder, I lived that out in front of my parents for 7 years. And any of those things that they reached out to were usually pushed back on. That is typical. So again, this is a hard line. I just want to acknowledge that it's a hard line. So let me get to some of the practical ways to respond. So let me go to the practical things. So kids in crisis, again, if they will do those things, that's good. If they're resisting, then you can't force them. And that's what's hard. That's what's hard about letting go. That is what is hard. Inserting a lot of super fun to watch. Inserting a lot. Yes, praying a ton. You're exactly right, Mandy. It is hard to watch. And what is hard right now is that we are in a microcosm. So try to flip it to your teen's point. So all of a sudden your teen, who normally is running towards independence and autonomy, is out of your sight more now. So hear me on this. When your teens typically seniors are right. They don't want to be around mom and dad all the time. And guess now who they're forced to be quarantined with? In the house with mom and dad, where everything they do is under scrutiny. So understand that. And so have some empathy. Have some empathy for your child to be able to say, okay, when I was their age, if this were happening to me, would I want to feel like I'm under the microscope of my mom and dad 24/7? And your answer probably would be no. I know my own kids, when I tend to be too helicopterish or hovering, even if what I don't think is what they're doing is best, they push back in that way too, right? So they're moving towards independence and autonomy. They don't want to be under scrutiny all the time. It feels as if they can't breathe. So let me go now to what are some other practical ways. So here's some practical tips then. So here's some typical end of year needs and what they might need that can be some practical solutions for them. Number one, what are their needs? So that's a really good question to ask them. And you might even approach it such as like, hey, let me just say this. This isn't the best scenario. I get that. You probably don't want me hovering all of you. I get that. What do you need right now? And they may say, I need you to get off my back. Okay, so what that probably means is they need some space. I need you to not tell me how I feel all the time because you don't really know how I feel. Stab in the heart, right? Have you heard that one before? I need you to not tell me what to do. Or I need to be with my friends. Okay, so how can you help them, again, have control over the things that they can't have control of in their life during this time? So if they need social connections, how can you help them connect with their friends in ways that are healthy? Use the House Party app, use Marco Polo, use Zoom. There are a variety of apps out there where they can connect with their friends. So think about that. Can you do something creative? Again, this goes out to each of your communities and each of your family systems. You know, can you get together with a friend? You drive them there and they sit in the back of their trunks 6 feet apart and just to see each other or something. Just think about that. Think about tangible ways that are within the healthy guidelines of what's appropriate and helpful. Okay, if they need ceremonies, so this is another thing. Do they physically need, are they worrying about their graduation? Are they worrying about their prom? Help them have realistic things that they can do. Maybe in 2 weeks, maybe in 2 to 4 weeks, this stuff is lifted. And then they're going to be scrambling. Like, help them have some real practical things that they can maybe plan. Maybe typical reactions. Yes, suggestions to help determine when they cross over into mental health crisis and when parents do need to intervene. I will get to that, Deborah, for sure. I'm kind of getting through the typical ones first, and then I'm going to get to the mental health ones. Okay, so let's talk about practical solutions that they can have control over. Do they need help? Can you help them plan a party, maybe in June, when they can get together with their friends? And if the school is not going to have any ceremonial things this summer, if your local school, which they may not know yet, does not have any ceremonies or something like that, no, that's fine. I'll get to that, Deborah. Then plan your own. Perhaps plan your own end of year celebration. Like, I'm graduating. Continue to plan that open house if your community, if you normally have graduation parties for your senior. If prom is the big thing that they're missing out on, then let your teen and her friends or her partner plan a special event that they can do together where they can dress up. Those are definitely things that you can help them create that is within their control. So help them think about what they're really missing. What are some of those losses? What are some of the losses that they can have tangible answers for, and then help them plan them. Again, those rite of passages are really important. Okay. So this gets me to what are some of their needs? What are some of their physical needs and mental health needs? Parent helps and mental health for your kids. These are some questions to ask about their behavior. Is their behavior new? So again, is their behavior new, or is it typical of their responses to crisis or their responses of things when they are out of control? Or is it typical of their responses to things that don't go according to plan? So think about your child and ask the questions. Is their response typical for how they respond to disappointment? Is their response typical to when things don't go their way? Is their response typical for them when they feel out of control? Are they retreating more because you are hovering, and that's something that you two go round and round with? So really think about what's typical for your teen and how they're responding. One way to talk to your teen about things is to just check in on them. So maybe rather than trying to get them to do certain things, conversations to maybe start with them of just being able to acknowledge, like, hey, I know this is really hard for you. But I do want you to know that I just want to check in with you. How are you doing? Open up that conversation, but take their cues. Don't project how you think they're feeling onto them. Let them respond. You may not even ask, like, how are you feeling? That may feel really threatening for them. If your child typically talks about their feelings, then open up that door for them. If your child typically doesn't talk to you about their feelings, then maybe open up with a question of, what do you think about, your school year not ending the way that it is? And then give them a chance to talk, and then just listen. Don't try to fix everything for them. You can follow up with a question of, how can I help you? Like, is there something I can do? Is there something we can do together to help you try to figure out what to do with things right now? Think about it this way. Think about you being on a team with your child. Let them know that you're on the same team. Seniors typically don't want their parents to tell them what to do. They really are trying to figure things out, but they also want their parents there as that support system. It's a very fine line for seniors typically. So if your teen, okay, two things I want to say in response also to, is their behavior new? And is it new for them? Is it typical for them? Respond with a lot of grace. So in this season, rather than punitive responses to behavior that is typical for them, they need a lot of grace. And grace, a term that a mentor of mine often uses, is an umbrella of grace. So think of your home as being an umbrella of grace during this time. And underneath that umbrella of grace is that rather than you trying to fix things for your student, because you can't fix what's happening. You can't fix when stores are going to open again. You can't fix the decisions based on your local school system. You can't fix the situation of what your governor is going to decide. But what you can do is you can give your child grace. You can help them think of what they have control of within their own scenario, within their own confines. What do they have control of? And then chase the why. Chase the why with your student. Now, don't chase it for them. Don't force them to chase it. But this is more for you, mom. When you see them acting a certain way, and if you can say like, hey, I'm just wondering how you're doing. And whatever their answer is, whether it's functioning out of fear brain, which is fight, flight, or freeze, just to be able to kind of ask them like, how can we work together to just help you like through this? And understanding that their behavior is probably an iceberg, right? What you see is on the top, and underneath is something much bigger. Probably what's underneath there has been there for a while. It's just now coming to the surface because the pressure of everything kind of squeezes out what's inside. Kind of think of like a toothpaste tube, right? When we squeeze things, what's inside of us comes out. So if your child was probably struggling with other things, it's probably the pressure of everything now that's pushing a lot of it to the surface. And so be a place of grace where they feel comfortable coming to you, where you're not going to try to analyze them or fix it, a quick fix for them, or but validating their feelings, giving them space if their space is what they need, kind of letting them lead the dance a little bit. So parenting and kind of going through this crisis is kind of like dancing with them. And it's such a finesse. It's kind of an art, but it's very relational. It's very slow, but it's kind of like letting them lead. And then when, so this goes to Deborah's question of what happens if, where's that fine line between when to step up and really reach out for help, is to really know your child, to be able to gauge, is this circumstantial? Like, have they seen a therapist in the past? Would they be open to counseling? If they're open to counseling, then reach out and get that set up for them. Let me see. The dance partner has left the floor. Okay. No, he hasn't, Deborah. The dance partner has not left the floor. That means that it means that he's responding out of probably fight, flight, or freeze. And you know your child best. Again, this is not a counseling session for each of your situations, and so it's hard to be able to speak into every situation. But trust your gut. If your gut says you know your child enough, and it's kind of like a doctor pushing on, when you're trying to find out where's the problem, and the doctor kind of pushes on the body until something says ouch, and you just kind of know that something's not right, but you can't pinpoint it. Is to trust your gut. If your child, of course, is retreating more and more, and you're afraid that they're sinking into a depression that seems just out of your control, then of all means seek out professional help in your local community. Seek out, talk with your child. Even if they're not listening, talk with them. Or even if you don't think they're listening or responding, talk with them. To be able to say, share your concerns with them. But also, again, take their lead. But if you feel that they're suicidal, if you feel that they're engaging in harmful behaviors that are going to be hard to pull them back from, seek out professional help in your area, again through a counselor in your community who can help you talk through these very specific things. Sometimes you can't get your child to the counselor, but sometimes reaching out to a counselor in your local community can help you, and that can be done through teletherapy too. This is not what that is, and so it's hard for me to speak in to all of these wide variety of scenarios, knowing that some may really be over here, some may be in the middle, and some may be over here. Some may really be experiencing just disappointment and just a lot of loss that's circumstantial, and with a few of these tweaks, a few of these suggestions, they will respond to that. Some are in the middle and they're just really vacillating. So again, taking it back to what's normal for your child. What was normal behavior before all this happened? Has this just been the catalyst that has brought to the surface some deeper things that were going on inside of them? So that brings me to a few more tips that I want to say, is that try to figure out what's typical. Give them healthy coping tools, which are some of the ones I've just given you. Give lots of grace. Parents have empathy with boundaries. Again, empathy with boundaries. So empathy with boundaries is, I know you're tired. I know that sleeping is probably the easiest way for you to escape the sense of like, what's the purpose? Why be up a whole lot, right? Why should I be up if there's nothing meaningful to do? So have empathy with boundaries, but then go back to routine, stability, and consistency. Okay, so if you're not up by 1 o'clock every day, I'm gonna wake you up, because we're gonna wake up and we're gonna have a meal together, or we're gonna wake up and we're gonna do something. Watch for destructive patterns. Again, watch for those destructive patterns. So if things are destructive, this is where you can talk about it. Perhaps there's been destructive patterns already, but they were hiding it from you, and now you're all living together. And so it may be that you just now are noticing. But if they are responding in ways that are destructive or harming to themselves or to others, please, again, do seek out professional help. And with teletherapy, it makes it an option for you and for your teen. Ask them how they're doing, but take their lead. And then just understanding, parents, these are big losses to deal with. The bottom line is let your senior, let your young adult, let your teen know that you care. And sometimes it's just as simple as that. It's as simple as going into their room where they're disconnected, rubbing their back, or just sitting beside them and saying, "This really sucks. it's hard for us as adults to go through this, but I know it's even harder for you to go through this. So I just want you to know that I really care. And it's hard for me to see you disconnect. It's hard for me to see you miss everything that you're missing. It's hard for me to see you not really know what the future is going to hold. Don't be afraid to be honest and caring with your kids, because at the end of the day, that's probably what they need the most. Now, just some other practical tips, and I'm going to finish up here because we're winding up the hour mark, is that your kids might really need practical solutions for what the future holds. And this is what I've told my own college students, is that they are probably in the best position of anyone to face the future. Why? Because they really do have the future ahead of them. It may not be as certain in the next few months as what they had hoped. There might be changes in what their colleges look like, but more than likely, I would probably say more than likely, things will return to more of a normalcy, of more of a new normal than what other places are sharing. Why? Because, so the history teacher in me says that things are going to swing back to the middle, and hopefully in a better way. As a historian, I have studied human behavior, and I've studied time periods, I've studied society for most of my life. And if you look at typical things that happen in cycles, our country's been due for a big upheaval. But things will go back to new normal, and your kids are in a position that that this doesn't have to be a negative thing for them. It will certainly define a lot of things for them, but have them understand that they have education ahead of them. They don't have to go out and find a job if they don't have the pressure to pay off student loans right now, because they have a place to live. So think of it the positive way, just like we have with our own college student. My own college senior, he's not going to have a college graduation. His interviews are on hold right now, but we're looking at it. Good thing to happen now than 5 months down the road, when he already signed a lease to an apartment. He was already living on his own, and then he gets cut from his job. So have your teen really think about the things that are practical and forward looking. Have them put some dates on their calendar. Come up with some of these activities that you can do during the summer that he's missing, and he or she are missing this spring. And then have them use this time to really look at, what do they want to do with their life? Like, this is a big pause. So use it to maybe spend some time talking about what really would you like to be doing in 5 years or 10 years. And if they're like, I don't know, because the world's going to be so different, have some positive truth. So that's another thing I mentioned in here is positive truth. Again, I could talk on this for probably a whole nother hour. Positive truth is really important. Focus on the positive truth. Try to shut off the news in your home as much as possible. Try to shut off social media in your home as much as possible. Try to speak some positive truth into the life of your child. And positive truth is not you putting a silver lining on what's happening. It's just in saying there's two ways to look at this mug. It's either half empty or half full, or cold. I've got cold coffee. I have cold coffee in here. So the positive truth is, the negative truth is I've got cold coffee. The positive truth is, hey, iced coffee is great, right? There's negative truth and there's positive truth. So help your child look at things from a different perspective, but with a way that validates their feelings, helps them identify their losses. And then I just wanted to finish with page 136 to 138 in Fledge, where it talks about redefining expectations. And even in your home and for your own teen, is to redefine the expectations for this period. Normally your expectations for April and May for your seniors would be completely different from where they are now. And again, if you are really alarmed at their behavior, then reach out to someone professional in your area, and but also understand that you're also maybe jump starting a phase of life with your kids, which is as they grow older, as they become young adults, you can't control everything around them, and watching them make hard choices, watching them cope in ways that aren't healthy, those are really hard. But of course, if you are worried that they're suicidal or that they are harming themselves or someone else, don't hesitate to reach out to a professional in your area to seek help for that. That's all I have. I actually have a lot more, but our time is up, and I want to pray for all of you. Oh, which brings me to how to help your kid pray. And go back to Melissa's video that she had about 3 weeks ago was on prayer. Read the chapter in Fledge on prayer. If anything, when you go into that room with your child and you sit beside them and you say, I know this is really rough, and I know you're not letting me in, but I do pray for you, and is it okay if I pray with you right now? And then you pray with them. So I'm going to do that right now with you. Lord Jesus, we just thank you so much that you are sovereign and you are in control. And Father, it feels very vulnerable for us as moms to not know how our kids are taking all of this and how they can respond. So Father, I ask that you would equip us with the words and the tenderness of seeking you to let us know perhaps how we need to reach out to our child. Lord, I ask that you would help every mom to seek your perspective. As she prays for her child, Lord, reveal to her what is important for them to pray for. Help them, Father, to be able to recognize what is maybe typical and what's not typical. What is typical for their child and what's not. How to ask some questions that are very, that are not threatening, but also an invitation for their child to share what's going on underneath the iceberg that they just see on top. Father, we thank you that in these uncertain times that you are not uncertain, that you are stable, you are predictable, you are constant. So as every mom here leans into your character, I ask that you would supply her needs as she watches and as she cares for her senior, as her young adult or other teen. And I ask, Lord, that you would meet her where she is, that you would meet her immeasurably more than she could ask or imagine. And I ask all of this, Lord Jesus, for your honor and for your glory. Amen. All right, friends. That's it. We'll see you next Monday. Actually, next Monday, I believe, is Melissa will share, but I will be here for prayer on Friday, and we'll probably pop in midweek to see how you're doing. Feel free to post any questions that you have. Perhaps we can follow up with a few answers if you've got questions, but and then encourage each other too. So I look forward to hearing from you. Don't lose heart, hang in there, and remember that Fledge actually prepared you for a lot of this, because so much of this is very typical of teens, young adults, letting go, being independent and autonomous. So don't forget to maybe revisit some of the chapters in Fledge, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.